We're Hassani and Danielle Pettiford, and we're a real couple with real problems who almost called it quits.
I was very frustrated. I became very disconnected, very jaded and cold.
We have 4 children, going on 20 years of marriage, and we practice what we preach.
Our mission, to change the way couples relate to one another and teach them the skills needed to improve the quality of their relationships. This is the Couples Academy Show.
Well, welcome everyone to the Couples Academy Show. My name is Hassani. Joining me is
Jeffrey Witt. How you guys doing today?
There it is, Jeffrey Witt. You know who he is. He's been on here. He's a regular. He's one of our practitioners. He works with all of the men. If you are a man, if you are a husband or husband-to-be, and you're ready to become a better man, a better husband, a better father, a better business owner, just a better you, then you need to get down with Jeffrey Witt, because he's been changing the lives of men all over the world. And now you have an opportunity to have that happen in your household. Listen, it is Tuesday. I know that on Monday, we were not here. It was a long weekend, folks. We were celebrating my wife's 45th birthday celebration, and it was fantabulous. We're going to give you some highlights. We were supposed to live stream it, but of course, the devil is busy, but God is busier than the devil. And we weren't defeated. We got it recorded, and we're going to be sending you some clips that I think that you'll be entertained by. But what we're doing is continuing in a series. We're continuing in a series. We were doing relationship Q&A on Friday, and it was so incredible. Many of your comments were coming in, and I said we were going to continue that conversation this week. So we have a lot of questions for you that we're going to dive into. But before we get started, we want to make sure that you take the time to do what? To like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to do that. We want to know where you're dialing in from all over the world. So represent your city, your state, your country. Do what you got to do so that we can recognize you this morning. So Facebook user, good morning. Welcome back from the wonderful birthday celebration. We appreciate you. Jackie, good morning from Spartanburg, South Carolina. Kathy, Carmel, Fedolina, Christopher, Tanya, the list goes on and on. All right. Hopefully, you guys, you can see me. I think we have maybe a little bit of internet issues on this side, but hopefully we can get through. Jeff, you ready to get into these questions?
Let's go.
All righty. Here we go. Question number 1, how do you handle a controlling mother-in-law who's still attached and in his son's life 1,000% and don't want to let go?
You can't handle him. He has to. So that's really an issue with the husband there. He's going to need to, sit down and have a discussion with you about how he's going to have to create some boundaries in that situation. Like you said, Hassani, what were you saying before? Something about like he has to create something about you.
Well, yeah, listen. A person will only do what you allow them to do. A person's going to be who they are, but you've got to establish boundaries for yourself, for your marriage, for your household. You've got to establish your own rules, your own culture, what works for you. And so it's less about, in my opinion, the mother-in-law, and it's more about what's going on with the son. Is there this attachment that this grown man, listen, at the end of the day, you've heard the term before, mama's boy. And it's not just about the male, because listen, I'm going to tell you something. There are cultures, we deal with cultures all over the world. And if you were to ask them to prioritize marriage and family, you will have some who will prioritize the marriage as number 1, family number 2. But you have others who may prioritize family as number 1 and marriage as number 2. And the voice and the opinion and the influence of family outweighs the spouse. And this is what causes a spouse to feel some type of way, like they have no voice in their own home. They have no power in their own home. They have no influence over their own life, their own children, because the influence of the family, it's not like the parent is bogarting, but the child may allow it because they didn't understand the transition that was supposed to take place. In Genesis, it talks about how a man should leave his father and mother, cleave unto his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Well, you have to establish a culture for that household, rules for that household, and every other relationship thereafter is secondary to the primary relationship of the partnership. And if couples aren't on the same page, then it's going to create a problem. So I would sit down with him and have a conversation and take the focus off the mom. And you know what? Put more of the focus on what you're going to do in your household. And then he, as the son, needs to have a conversation with the mom and say, listen, there's a new sheriff in town, and this is what we're doing, and this is how it's going to be. Those are my thoughts on that.
I usually feel like that's the key is families tend to adapt. The outside family tends to adapt to what you set the boundaries as. You'll watch as they slowly become accustomed. I'm not going to say there's not going to be tension, but if you remove the emotion from the situation and just establish what you want and lay down that law clearly that, look, this is the guidelines and parameters on, there's certain things you're not going to touch or not going to interfere in. I feel like when that is established clearly and those lines are drawn and actually fortified and strengthened by your actions, saying, hey, look, if you cross the doors of my home, or if you're in a conversation with my spouse, you will not do this, or not necessarily that there's going to be repercussions, but we may not be able to move forward in our relationship ourselves. And when that line is drawn, I'm telling you, I've seen more times than not that the in-laws fall in line.
Absolutely, 1,000%. Jamoke, this question is kind of an alignment because we were talking about boundaries. How do you establish boundaries without sounding authoritative post-infidelity? Well, here's the deal. The boundaries should be established by you two as a couple, because if you're handing down rules or codes or parameters that now your spouse has to obey and live by, he or she may be resistant, may give pushback. This is why we say, if you want your spouse to buy into something, allow them to weigh in to something. Their weigh-in leads to their buy-in. And that's where, you're in the best position to have something that is going to be honored, long-term. All right, we have another question. My whole relationship has been I'm sorry, guys, a lie over 20 years. I found out a year ago that basically he's tried to I can't even read this. Tired of me bringing it up, not sure what to do at this point. So I guess there was an affair that took place. The spouse keeps bringing it up. The other partner is sick and tired of hearing it. What do we do about it? Well, listen, at the end of the day, the spouse most likely is bringing it up because you two have not gone through a process that would allow for a healthy, comprehensive conversation to unpack it all. We say this all the time. If you've ever put a puzzle together, you may have 100 pieces in that puzzle and you're trying to put it together, and what should have normally taken 2 hours, maybe a day or so, you realize, wait a minute, there's only 65 pieces in this puzzle. There's missing pieces. So there are gaping holes and I just can't figure this thing out. And now it's taken 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, and I'm stuck and I can't move forward. And you want me to live life as normal and I can't get this thing out of my mind. I'm obsessed. I'm thinking about it constantly. And you hold the missing pieces to the puzzle and you won't give them to me. So now I feel some type of way about you. I can't trust you. What are you keeping from me? What don't I know? I become preoccupied with that. And yet you want to move forward and I can't move forward. So if we're one, let us go through this process together. And if we can't do it on our own, let's find somebody who can guide us so that we can get past this pain. Because people who are trapped in this discovery phase and constantly asking the questions, they're what? Asking questions about the past. And every time they talk about the past, they're reliving those feelings and emotions that drag them both down. And so listen, if you're sick and tired of your spouse asking you questions, then go dive deep into the conversation, give your spouse what she needs so the questions stop. It's just that simple. So what do? Get counseling. Go to somebody who can set up a safe environment for the truth to come out. Jeff?
And I'm going to be real about this. It really is the right counseling, right? Because I've seen where counseling has drug on and done this discovery process over months and months and months and months. And then I watched you for the first time, and yours is done in a series of hours consecutively, where there's a washing and a cleansing period. There's someone there to pull out certain things from people who are trying to hold back. And there's a calming down, because a lot of times there's questions that have been answered, but the anger is overriding them listening. And so someone who knows what they're doing in that process and can guide you through that whole period and kind of play referee, because it's going to be a competition for ideas in that particular moment, because you want to get your point across and you want to get your point across, and you have your reasons and they have their reasons. You need someone there who's like, well, that wasn't fair, and wait a second, that needs a little more explanation. And if you don't have that in the counseling session, then it becomes pointless.
I agree with you 1000%. Let's go to the next. How do you handle if your husband is, listen, I was in the dark when I wrote these questions. Don't judge me. How do you handle if your husband is on a great path and trying, but he is still too friendly / nice and sometimes doesn't recognize that in business with women? Is that hard for men to recognize?
Ooh, pick me. That is absolutely a very real thing. My wife had a hard time explaining that to me. It is very difficult to get beyond if you've grown up in an environment where most of your friends were women. Mine were all women. It's 100% the other way around now. Those boundaries have to be established, and you're correct. There is a too friendly. We have basically business hours, and anything that goes beyond business hours has to be cleared. Like, if I'm working on a major project or any of those kinds of things, I'll let my wife know in advance, hey, I'm going to have this conversation. There is a female involved. I let her know she can sit right at the door if she wants to. She can't necessarily be involved in the conversation, but transparency, and then, establishing those boundaries. Like for me, 9 to 6, I can have conversations with females in business, and there's not this friendly personal stuff going on other than the niceties that go along with traditional business. But there's no extra conversations. I don't really know their kids or any of those kinds of things. Don't try to get involved in that way, because it's dangerous. It really, truly is dangerous. I've had situations that have gone beyond where I was being too nice, where other people have shown interest in me and literally try to drive a wedge between me and my wife at a particular point, because they reached out to my wife in a business situation. And that was my fault completely, because I let them get comfortable. And if you don't draw those boundaries that establish this is a business relationship, I'm glad your kids are doing well. I'm glad your husband's doing well. But beyond and above that, let's try to keep to the focus of what we're here to accomplish. You know what I mean?
I do. And also we got to consider the fact that there are personality differences between people. I see this dynamic all the time. Danielle and I were talking about this, how you have two people come together and opposites often attract. One is the crazy one is the more, serious one is the more friendly, sociable one is more of the social introvert. And so that also plays into the sensitivity that we have to how our spouse shows up. And so they're just naturally being nice and friendly, but to your point, that friendly, nice disposition you have, could be misinterpreted as something more and can give a false impression. So this is why it's important to establish what is okay. How do I be my authentic self, but do it in a way that doesn't cause any type of confusion and give the false impression? See, that takes work, that takes conversation, and coming to the meeting of the minds of how to approach that. Listen, guys, you're watching the Couples Academy show. We have more questions for you. We'll be right back, but just stay there right after this brief message. See you in a second. That's right. That is the last chance weekend, folks. Let me just tell you, I'm happy to say that we only have one room left. Who's it going to be? Who's it going to? Many of you have been registering this weekend, and we're excited to have you. We're just a few short weeks away, but there's room for one more to be here in person. So if you're still vacillating and trying to figure it out, or maybe you're looking for, how do we deal with our children and how do we deal with work schedules? Let me tell you something. Here's a tip, right? Oftentimes we're waiting for the circumstances to be right before we make a decision. And it doesn't work like that, folks. When you make a decision, circumstances have to submit to your will. At the end of the day, if you made the decision to come, guess what? You'll figure out a way to handle everything else. You're trying to figure out how do we handle everything else before we make the decision. And guess what? That slot will be filled. And there is no date for the next one. This is the last one for the year. And the reason why this is so important, folks, and Jeff, we've been talking about this before, as you hit the fourth quarter of every year, this is the time where people are really determining, how do I want to go into the next year? Do I want this weight, this baggage? Do I want this pain? Do I want to be free? Do I want to continue to work on this relationship? And so the divorce rate, or at least divorce filings, skyrocket in November and December. It's during that holiday season. And we want to partner with you to help you stay on track within your relationship. So listen, one more, just reach out to us at couplesacademy.org, set up a discovery call. Let's get further into a discussion and dialogue about how we can be of assistance to you. All right, let's go back to the questions. Let's see, the next question. If you should love your wife like God loves the church, does that mean you should always forgive? JD.
I'm going to say this. Forgiveness is not necessarily something you're giving to someone else. Forgiveness really is something you're doing for yourself, because harboring that anger, that animosity, that pain, holding that resentment, as the great saying once said, is drinking a poison and hoping someone else is going to die. It's literally you holding on to this pain, this suffering. Now, we can't do much about physical pain, but suffering is in the mind. It exists in our memory most, and also in our imagination. And these are two things. We're worried about what could happen, and we're worried about things that have already happened. But if you can just learn to be here now and see what's right in front of you, deal with the evidence that you're seeing right in front of you, you can relieve yourself of that suffering, and it makes forgiveness a gift you give yourself.
That is powerful. That's something to hold on to 1,000%. I'm not even going to pervert that by contributing my portion to that answer. Let's go to the next one. Next week will be 2 years since my wife's infidelity. We separated for a few months and got back together, but I feel we are just tolerating each other. And now she is pregnant. What should I do? When I read that question, what should I do? You can always interpret text, right? So a lot of times when people come to me who are not married, they're dating. Oh man, I've been dealing with this, female, and she just got pregnant. What do I do? And the question is kind of positioned like, do I stay? Do I go? Do we abort? Do we keep? Like, usually that's the context of the question. So that's immediately how I saw it when you asked it, but I'm assuming you mean something different. I hope you mean something different, because if the thought of leaving is in your mind, well, we're past that thought. No, the question is, what do we do now that we have a child, which is yet another situation we have to deal with? Because listen, you're married, you have three kids, right, Jeff? So I don't know about in your household, but every time Danielle got pregnant, I was Satan incarnate. I was the devil to her. It was a rough season because of the hormones and the sensitivities, and we were fussing and we were fighting on top of the normal stuff that we were dealing with. So it's a season that will be there. You can overcome it. But in the meantime, you have to realize that you need to get help. Once again, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know if you've read a book. I don't know if you watch any of our shows together. I don't know what's being done. And so until I get something, I'm always going to point back to the same thing. Get help. And I say this all the time. Albert Einstein said that you can't create a solution from the same level of consciousness that created the problem. So you're relying on what you know, and your wisdom has gotten you as far as you can go. And that's when you have to rely on the wisdom and expertise of someone else. Jeff?
I absolutely agree, 1000%. And I think also what ends up happening, and this is true of every marriage, especially in mine, is, you reach this point where there's no more common goals. The goals have either been achieved and there's this period of lack. And, they say idle hands, but I say idle time, and idle mind is the devil's playground. And so when you see that an idle mind is the devil's playground, you've got to create these unifying goals together of what you want. You don't have to sit there and agree on anything or drag anyone with you, but whether it's as simple something like a trip you guys want to plan on taking, whether it's this year, next year, or the future, a business you want to start together, places you want to go, or things you want to enjoy together. You have to have things you want to learn together or go through the experience of together. It doesn't have to be something huge, but when you're tolerating each other, there was a point when you actually really, really loved each other. Me and my wife were tolerating each other for the 7 years, after 2 years of marriage, 7 years of and 8 years of toleration of each other. And it came to a breaking point, and she got pregnant again. And that became our breaking point. I mean, we had it out. Okay. But I made a decision. I made a decision to be more myself and build more for us. And my wife was not on board with that right away. But when I actually just did the work, and I think, Hassan, you have a similar story, because it's in the intro of the show. When you make the decision to just put in the work, you were showing up with your wife with videos. Hey, baby, let's watch this video. That's how Couples Academy was born. It's the decision by at least one partner to be more, have more, and do more within, and suck less within the relationship. And when you become concerted in that effort, and when you become joyous in that effort, not always expecting their immediate response, you should see a difference.
I totally agree. I'm going to go to this comment. Husband had affairs over a year ago. We're still together, but even after counseling, I still feel crushed and can't breathe. So a couple things I'm going to say to that. Number one, are you with the appropriate counselor? Listen, you got... Whatever your issue is, find somebody who specializes in what you're dealing with. Do you know how many times we do discovery calls every single day and people are saying, well, yeah, we're currently in counseling. I'm like, okay, so what are you dealing with in your marriage? We're dealing with infidelity. Okay, does the person you are counseling with, do they specialize in infidelity? I don't know. You know what? I don't know. I said, well, are they infidelity recovery specialists? I never really asked. Well, how did you find them? By insurance. They just provide it. Are they married? No. So we're going to the wrong people looking for the right advice. And then we're like, it didn't work. Well, you have to find the appropriate person, number one. Number two, we can't just rely solely on counseling, the silver bullet mentality. All right, I'm going to just do that one thing. It has to be coupled or supplemented with other things. And this is why joining a support group, doing your own personal study, I think that's the most powerful. Think about going to church every single Sunday and you hear all this great word, and then you still live the same life you've always been living. Why? Because you can't grow based upon a 20 or 30-minute sermon. It's the work that you do in between the services, the study, right? The meditation, the prayer, the stuff that you do when no one else is looking, that produces the change and transformation that you're looking for. So when it comes to being crushed and can't breathe, there is that personal work. And Jeff, you can tag team with this, because this is what you've guided so many men through to become better versions of themselves and to help them deal with their emotions.
The first thing I'll say is you don't go to a chiropractor for heart surgery. So just because someone has that psychology degree, PhD, or otherwise on that wall does not mean that they understand relationships. One of the questions you should ask a counselor, and I'm not saying every counselor necessarily needs this, but it does help. Are they in a happy marriage themselves? Right? Because
can we pause? I'm sorry. We need to pause on that. Are they in a happy marriage themselves? How many people are miserable in their situation, but then want to tell you and give you advice on what you need to do with yours? Rule number one, Jeff, break down rule number one.
Yeah, rule number one is, who do I listen to? It's only people that have what I want and been where I've been. I'm not going to my neighbor for marriage advice. I'm looking for the couple that's 50 years married, still doing PDA and the whole get a room types after they've been 50 years in marriage. The ones that are still traveling the world, holding hands in public, still giving each other affection, where their kids are like, ew, mom and dad, you're disgusting. That's the kind of love I want in my relationship. It's the kind of love we've achieved in our relationship. I love hearing my kids say, ew, dad, get a room. Like, ew. Like, that's the greatest thing in the world for me to hear. That means I know that my children see that I still love my wife and that my wife still loves me. We're still chasing each other around the house 20 years in. And it's possible. It's even possible after you've gone through the whole process of having chaos.
I totally agree. So hopefully, sis, there's some additional work in addition to the counseling, and also your counselor should be recommending, books, courses, things in addition that you can use. We did a video, you'll continue to cheat unless you do these 6 things, but we could swap that out for anything. You'll continue to have pain in your life unless you do these 6 things, right? So we talked about couples counseling, individual counseling, support group, spiritual transformation, a path to personal growth and development. Like, there's a number of different things. And oftentimes you don't know what you'll need in that moment, but just do as much as possible to get you through and to help you overcome. And so we're encouraging you to reach out to us at couplesacademy.org. There's one more question in here.
Real quick, I hate to say something, Jeff. One shameless plug. If you have the chance to do the Last Chance Weekend, I'm going to tell you that there are experiences built in. It's not just a bunch of counseling or lectures. There are experiences built in that literally change and force a change in your perspective. I won't go through giving them away right here, but if you take the time and if you have the ability, get that last slot, because it will create a dynamic change in your relationship. I promise you that. Like, I was in tears at the last one I went to, and it was, I was in tears watching these couples fall in love again. That it's an amazing experience to see that happen.
Jeff, I think you hit it right on the head. It's about the experience, and there's certain things that you can't experience unless you come to that Last Chance Weekend. We literally saw a transformation in real time. We saw walls come down. We saw healing take place. We saw couples do in that weekend what they hadn't done in 20 years. And so once again, I appreciate you mentioning that.
See big, tough guys who come in there acting hard like they're going to put their foot down, turn into babbling babies telling us how much they really love their wives. And they didn't walk in there like that. They left like that.
Now, that is a fact. Last question really quickly. Does Couple Academy take insurance? I'm glad you asked that question, because we get that question in the discovery call a lot. We do not take insurance. In fact, many of the practitioners and colleagues that we know outside of Couples Academy, they don't take insurance as well. It's just not something that we do. We are out of pocket. And the reality is, listen, folks, if you are searching for what is the most affordable, we're going to lose that every single time. But I'm going to tell you, when I'm looking for a physician, I'm not looking for who's the most affordable, right? When I'm looking for an attorney, I'm not looking for who's the most affordable, who's the cheapest. I'm not looking for that, because oftentimes you do get what you pay for. And I've learned that if you want
points, you and me are going to disagree on.
What?
If you've ever seen the cost of what an average divorce is when there's assets involved at all, like just a basic house, the average cost of a divorce in the state of Georgia, for instance, is $39,000 in just attorney's fees, much less alimony, child support, anything else that goes with it. So this is extremely affordable. It's much better than divorce. And if you think you're on that out where you're at your last straw, trust me, it's a lot more affordable, and there's definitely a higher probability of this being successful for you.
That's a powerful, powerful statement, guys. Listen, this has been a great conversation, but it's not over. Just know that tomorrow we're continuing in it, because we want to get to your answers. There's a lot of questions that are still coming in. Listen, if you're watching this on the replay, post your question, because we do see it, and we'll make sure that we'll address it the next day. But we will see you in the morning, guys. Love you and have a great day. Peace.